Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep, really deep into Nietzsche's diary.txt.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be good.
And it's not like your typical diary, dates and dinner plans. This is Friedrich Nietzsche wrestling with the big questions, the stuff that shaped his whole philosophy.
You get right to the source, It's not him trying to be persuasive, it's him trying to figure things out. That rawness makes it really special for understanding how his mind worked.
So let's start at the beginning. Rücken, Germany.
Huh.
A tiny village where Nietzsche was born in 1844.
Okay.
His father. A Lutheran pastor.
Yeah.
You can imagine, right? The atmosphere. Very pious, very religious.
And that makes it even more striking when Nietzsche later, rejects traditional religion altogether. I mean, was that early environment what pushed him in the opposite direction? Something to think about?
Yeah, like the groundwork was laid, but then, boom, huge shift. When he's only 5, his dad dies.
Oh, wow, yeah. Losing a parent that young, especially one who represents, moral authority, it's got to have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's like the foundation cracks, right? And the family moves to Naumburg. This town's all about tradition, bourgeois values, order, morality, the proper way to do things.
So different from the free thinking Nietzsche becomes.
Right. You can practically feel the tension building. He's absorbing all these social norms, but already has this independent streak.
Fascinating, right? He's soaking it up almost against his will, and later those very norms become the target of his biggest critiques.
Yeah, like a sponge, but a rebellious sponge. We know Naumburg had a big impact. The military parades, the church services, all so serious and formal. But then there's the family stories, too. Nietzsche was fascinated by stories of his ancestors. The Counts Niesky, known for their bravery, their unwavering faith, even when they were persecuted.
It's so interesting how family lore gets woven into our identities. For him, it wasn't just about following in their footsteps, but about living up to this legacy. He wanted to achieve greatness, carve his own path.
And that ambition, you really see it. At 14, he leaves home, goes to Porta, this elite boarding school. Think super rigorous academics, heavy emphasis on religion.
Oh, wow.
And alumni. We're talking Novalis the poet, Fichte the philosopher. What a pressure cooker for a young mind.
Porta was practically a microcosm of the whole German intellectual world. Centuries of tradition. No wonder he felt overwhelmed sometimes.
Yeah, his diaries from then, you see it all. Homesickness, loneliness. The strict discipline must have been tough. But he finds comfort in writing, pouring his heart out into that diary.
He starts to find his own space, right? Those little moments of escape, they're so important.
He and his friends would explore the Saale River, too, connecting with nature,
Expressing himself, forming bonds. These are themes that pop up again and again in his life, and even in his philosophy.
It's like he's finding his rhythm within all that rigidity. But then, a real turning point. 1865, he discovers Schopenhauer.
Ah, Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, emphasized suffering, the limits of human existence.
And Nietzsche, he's captivated. Schopenhauer gives him this framework to understand the dark stuff, the stuff most philosophies kind of skipped over.
Yeah, his religious upbringing probably didn't really prepare him for that.
Right. Like Schopenhauer provided the words for doubts he already had but couldn't articulate.
Yeah.
And this leads us to another huge figure, Richard Wagner.
Of course, Wagner.
Nietzsche, he loved music, opera especially. And when he meets Wagner in Leipzig, 1868, it's instant. They both admired Schopenhauer.
A meeting of the minds.
Nietzsche starts visiting Wagner's place in Switzerland, soaking up the creative energy, the ideas. Imagine that, eh?
Young Nietzsche, already brilliant with this titan of music. A mentorship that shapes his early work, but also sets the stage for their dramatic falling out later.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. But first, there's Nietzsche's first book, The Birth of Tragedy, published in 1872, exploring Greek tragedy, celebrating art. Lots of Wagnerian influence there.
A controversial book, right?
Definitely mixed reception. Wagner loved it, of course. But the academic world, not so much.
Yeah, that must have stung.
It probably fueled his growing disillusionment with traditional scholarship. Like, he saw the limits of that world he'd always wanted to be part of. And then comes the slow unraveling of his relationship with Wagner.
The breakup of these two giants, what happened there?
It was gradual, philosophical differences, artistic clashes. Maybe Wagner's fame got too big. Nietzsche felt he was compromising his art.
Makes sense.
By 1876, after the first Bayreuth Festival, it's over. Nietzsche's devastated, retreats into solitude, trying to process everything, find his own voice. So Nietzsche's on his own now, reeling from that Wagner breakup, trying to figure things out. And then enter Lou Salome.
Luz Salome, what a fascinating woman. Young, brilliant writer, total intellectual powerhouse. This is 1882. Nietzsche's in his late 30s. She's barely in her 20s.
And they hit it off.
Yeah, big time. Intellectually, at least. Remember, Nietzsche always had trouble with relationships. The Wagner thing really hurt him. And Salome, those stuffy academics weren't.
And I think there was some real attraction there, too. His diary kind of hints at, infatuation. She challenged him, represented something different from that rigid world he was rejecting.
Right.
And get this. He proposes marriage, not just to her, but to her A&D, their friend, the philosopher Paul Ray.
Whoa, hold on. A three-way philosophical marriage.
That's what he wanted.
Can you imagine?
Talk about unconventional. But Salome, she was fiercely independent. She turned him down.
Yeah, and that rejection hit him hard, sent him spiraling even deeper into isolation. You see some bitterness towards women in his writing from this period. Maybe that's part of it.
Could be. It's complicated, right? But the thing about Nietzsche, even heartbreak becomes fuel for his philosophy. This is when he starts working on Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
His most famous work, and it's got it all. The will to power, the Übermensch, the death of God. Big ideas.
Huge ideas.
Wow.
And it's not some dry philosophy textbook either. Zarathustra is poetic, symbolic. Those pronouncements, they've stuck with people for over a century. So, the Übermensch. What was Nietzsche getting at with that? It's usually translated as Superman, but it's not about capes and flying, is it?
No, definitely not. It's more about transcendence. The Übermensch is someone who goes beyond conventional morality, creates their own values, they're constantly striving, overcoming limitations, reaching their full potential.
That's pretty radical, especially back then. No wonder some people saw him as dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. It ties into his whole idea of the will to power, right? This driving force behind all life. Not about domination, but about growth, self-expression, mastery.
So it's not just personal ambition. It's pushing humanity forward, evolving.
Exactly. And all this is happening while Nietzsche's own health is falling apart. Migraines, vision problems, he's having what look like mental breakdowns.
It's tragic, isn't it? His body's failing, but his mind is on fire with these incredible insights.
Yeah, like a cruel joke. And eventually it leads to his complete collapse in 1889. He spends his last years with his mother and sister, unable to write, barely able to understand what's going on around him. Heartbreaking end to a brilliant but incredibly difficult life.
From the piety of his childhood to his total philosophical rebellion, the intense relationships, the struggles, the birth of those radical ideas, it's all there in those diary entries. What a story.
It really is. And for someone just starting to explore Nietzsche, I think the biggest takeaway is how personal his philosophy is. It's not just abstract ideas, it's rooted in his own experiences, his pain, his joys, his heartbreaks. You can't separate the man from the ideas.
Yeah, it's like you're peeking behind the curtain, seeing the real Nietzsche, not just the philosopher with the big pronouncements, but the guy struggling with life, just like the rest of us. And it makes those ideas of his even more powerful, I think, knowing where they came from.
Oh, for sure. It humanizes him, right? We think of these philosophers as these untouchable figures, but Nietzsche's diary, it's like, wait, he was a real person. He felt things deeply. Those experiences, they shaped his thinking. It's all connected.
And those health problems, the migraines, the bad eyesight. He was constantly exhausted. Makes you wonder how much that fueled his philosophy. Like all that emphasis on strength, on overcoming, on saying yes to life, even when it's hard.
That's such an interesting question. Did he develop those ideas because of his struggles, or did he turn to philosophy to, cope with them?
It's probably a mix, right? But
yeah,
you can't deny the connection between his life and his work.
It's all there in the diary. The beginnings of his ideas, the doubts, the moments where things click, the despair. It's a good reminder that philosophy, it's not just an intellectual game. It's tied to the person living it,
Absolutely. This deep dive, it's not just about analyzing his arguments. It's like seeing where they were forged in the fire of his own life. Right. It's like reading his thoughts in real time, seeing this mind develop, the mind that would end up turning Western thought upside down. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Nietzsche's diary.txt, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners? What sticks with you?
It's got to be the questioning. Nietzsche, he never just accepted anything at face value. He challenged everything: morality, religion, how society works, even his own beliefs. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us, I think. Never stop questioning. Never stop trying to understand more deeply. Don't be afraid to push the boundaries of your own thinking.
And maybe, in all that questioning, we find our own way to a more authentic life. A life that's true to ourselves, just like Nietzsche wanted us to do. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Friedrich Nietzsche. We'll be back soon with another look at the lives and ideas that shaped our world. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.